Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Democratizing Genetic Testing for Underserved Populations. My name is Sukhmen Nijjar, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. You can submit your questions via the Q&A option below. We really want to hear everyone's questions. This is an awesome time to collaborate and hear whatever you have to ask us in terms of feedback or questions about what we're working on. We'll be sure to get to them at the end of the day's discussion. We have a dedicated session just to answering your questions today. And we'll also be recording and sharing the session as well for everyone to view on demand afterwards. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Daniel Uribe, CEO and founder of Junobank, as well as Federico von Son, CEO and founder of Somos Ancestria. Today, we will allow both of them to introduce themselves. They'll tell us a little bit more about their background, what they're working on, and eventually how they came to work together and form a partnership. We'll then head into a panel discussion where we have a few questions pre-written, and we'll allow both of them to talk and engage on those questions. And like I mentioned, we'll end with a Q&A session for everyone to join. So today we'll be covering a variety of topics ranging from genomics to data security, entrepreneurship, and more. But before I pass it on to Daniel, I'd like to give everyone just a quick snapshot of who Junobank is, what we've done so far, and the direction that we're going. I know that I was looking at the attendees today, and we have a number of attendees from our previous Republic campaign, from WeFunder, from social media. So we have a really good diverse range of attendees today. So I'm happy to talk and provide as much info as we can, but again, this is a perfect opportunity for anyone and everyone to ask questions here. So just to get started, Junobank originally started as the first privacy-preserving DNA kit secured using blockchain technology. We were leveraging blockchain technology to help with security of biodata, and it was a really novel approach that gained a lot of interest last year. And as of late, very recently, there was a transition in our business model, really an update, where we were moving not only to a direct-to-consumer product, but how do we help enterprises who are dealing with biodata? And how do we provide and allow them to leverage our technology to do so? So, of course, consumers should feel safe when submitting their saliva samples, but how are modern healthcare and medical organizations ensuring the security? In the past few months, we're super grateful to be able to have a great response to this new extension of our business model. And we're happy to include not only Somos, who we'll be highlighting today, but two other enterprise customers, Rio and Portunos. Somos, just to give a brief highlight before Federico gets into it a little later on, is the first genetic test that is inclusive to populations throughout Latin America. Personally, I can relate to the need of a product like this. I use a service that's a genetic testing service, and I got my results back, and what did I get? 99.9% South Asian. And that doesn't tell me much, right? I mean, it's good to know that I have an idea of what my history is, but beyond that, it's not really much of a benefit to me personally. So this is a really, really interesting product. And what does it tell us, right? Like beyond the insights that we get into our ancestry and our culture, what can it provide us? And Federico will be touching a lot more on that today. This is just a brief, outlook on what their product looks like, right? Their user interface. It tells you exactly your cultural identity. It gives you the percentages. It gives you a heat map of the actual region that you're from. So it's a really awesome experience that Somos is providing to a new population that has never been able to incorporate with this before. But without further ado, I'd like to transition to Daniel, the CEO and founder of Junobank, to give an introduction of himself. And Daniel, you can take it away from here.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here again. We have friends, we have investors from, as Suk was saying, from our previous campaign in Republic. We are super grateful. None of this could have been possible without your support. And of course, to welcome the new investors from our most recent campaign in WeFunder is going very well. People is very, very enthusiastic about privacy and giving back control to the users of the internet in general, right? We are seeing like this WhatsApp kind of migration towards Telegram and Signal. Those are excellent, responses in general from users that privacy is more and more valued every day. And of course, I want to thank Federico because he's a researcher. He's a very young but very knowledgeable researcher in Mexico, and he's aware of this, and he's embracing this idea, this technology, and this is pretty awesome for us. And thank you for that. So a brief, introduction for me. I am the CEO and co-founder of Junobank. Literally, I'm a cybersecurity nerd, always being in the Unix world, from companies from Sun Microsystems, Oracle, being very enthusiastic of keeping the telecommunications companies in Mexico and the United States data safe. I was blown with the blockchain technology back in 2015. Since then, we've been involved with the technology. As you may know, in 2017, one of my kids had an accident. We discovered he had a genetic mutation or a variation that causes a pathological behavior or expression in his blood. And since then, I've been exploring, building, inventing techniques in order to make the genetic data secure and private as much as possible, especially using the blockchain technology that allows people to establish ownership and control over their data. So yeah, that's a little bit the mission. The mission is that everyone should own and control their genetic data. There is an ongoing discussion, of course, if because 99% of our genetic data is shared among us as human species. That is true, but especially Junobank is focusing on genetic variants, right? The 4 to 5 million bases that makes us really different, and of course those are the ones that researchers like Federico are looking for. So the mission is to try to tokenize those. Tokenize means to make it to use digital techniques to make them scarce or different from each other, to have a digital signature for your unique biological signature, which is your variants, and then use the technologies available to increase privacy and control over this data, and give that to each and every one of the users using a private key. So again, we are super enthusiastic. We are super happy to have Federico. We briefly met in Stanford like 3 years ago in a population genomics seminar that was it was organized by one of the professors, was Carlos Bustamante. He's very known in the space, and yeah, we met there back then, and we started talking about this, having a kit that could help researchers like him to say, hey, I'm not really interested on selling your raw data as many companies. I'm just here for the research and to help people to have insights, interesting insights and useful insights of their genetic information without compromising their privacy. And this is particularly important with indigenous and underserved or underrepresented populations. But that's where I would like to click or pass the baton to Federico. Please, Federico, welcome, and the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, that's true. We met back in Stanford. I think we were already talking and discussing about the concept even before we actually met.
Right.
And maybe that's part of the real foundation of Somos and how everything actually started. So just very briefly, I'm a medical doctor. My co-founder, Christian, who is actually there in the webinar too, he's also a medical doctor. And well, I have a very quite rare type of background. I'm an ex-athlete too. And when I started med school, I really wanted to get into technology development and deployment in the healthcare sector in Mexico, because I realized very early, actually, when I was started med school, I wanted to develop like a diagnostics companion with some friends at med school. We were trying to gather as much data as we could to try to develop a way to help physicians to make diagnoses a lot more faster and easier. And I realized that it was really a titanic task, and it was really hard to concentrate in school and also developing new technology. So when I finished med school, I recontacted, or Christian, my co-founder, actually recontacted me, because he was already working in developing an electronic health record. And I was working in my master's program with diabetic foot ulcers, and we were identifying potential markers so that we could understand better the process of diabetic foot ulcers formation and how we could actually try to help in curing these type of ulcers, which we know is one of the biggest problems for diabetics or complications. And so I started pivoting in different concepts, and I started my first startup actually when I was still doing my social service in med school. And I started first with genetics and sports performance, of course, because as an ex-athlete and now as a medical doctor, I wanted to understand more the correlation between genetics and sports performance. And I'm actually still involved in this type of projects, and I'm an advisor for a company in the Silicon Valley area that works with sports analytics. And we are also doing some research projects with one of the biggest soccer clubs in the world. You can imagine there are two big clubs, one of them. So I've been always related to that field, and it's something that it's really passionate for me, genetics and sports performance. And so when we started the first startup, we realized that we needed to find better ways to gather data, better ways to collect information. And we also realized that Latinos are one of the most underrepresented groups in scientific databases. So at that point, we thought that we needed to develop a concept and a project that could allow us to generate data in a decentralized manner that could actually help us represent Latinos in scientific databases. And that way we could advance in drug development and discovery. Less than 6% of drug discovery and development takes place in Latin America. And you can guess for whom we are developing drugs, right? So it's for not for Latinos. We are developing drugs even here in Latin America for Caucasian groups, for from people from Asia, so for different populations, but not for Latinos. And the problem is that we don't have enough data from these groups so that we can actually do science with it, and we can advance in target discovery. So back in 2017, it was quite curious. We started in the backyard. We had an office, and actually the office for my first startup was in the same place. Well, I had the office at home. So we used to meet every Tuesday and Thursday with very interesting master program students and researchers and young entrepreneurs that were working with mining Bitcoin and doing different stuff in the field of genomics. And we started to throw some ideas on how could we actually advance in a different strategy on how we collect data for Latinos, and how that could help us not only represent these groups, but also at the same time avoid what we've called biodigital colonization, because we know that we want data to be used for the best of it, and one of the reasons is we wanted for drug discovery and to improve the healthcare system, but we also wanted to be collaborative and And we started thinking at that point in the problems of data ownership and governance. And I think that's where I actually contacted you, Daniel, and we started throwing some ideas. You were also starting with a Junobank project, and we realized that we had probably like a very interesting point where we can actually connect and we could do a good match. Then just for different reasons and because we were probably working with different groups, we probably lost like the connection that we were already working on. And then I think I recontacted you maybe 1 year or 1.5 years ago again, and we started again pivoting into implementing blockchain technology for our biobank. So what Somos is doing is, in order to help generating data from Latinos, we saw that it was very important, or we identified that it was very important to generate data not only for admixed Latinos. We know that in general, Latinos and Hispanics, we come from a very combined structure from European populations, African populations. Of course, we have like some very specific groups that have established here in the continent and that have some difference between each other. We also have some heritage from Asian groups. So we know that all of this admixture and combination is very important to understand, and there's a lot of data to understand it. But we realized that we needed to start generating data from the indigenous groups and indigenous nations here in our region, here in Mexico, in Central and Southern America. Because that's the only way that we could actually help filling those gaps in the genomic data that is available out there. So that's when we actually realized that we needed to do it in a very secure way, that we needed to implement technology so that it could be not only secure, but even more importantly, scalable. And how do you scale? Well, we thought that the only way to do it is to co-participate with these indigenous nations and with the Latinos community and invite them to be a part of the project. So what Somos is putting together is a complete model where we can create very transparent bonds and relationships with the communities and also with the Latino participants, so that if in the future the data generates some value, we want to share that with them. And we want to share it because we cannot claim to own something that we cannot own. You know, like genetic data is one of the most valuable individual prints that we have, and we know that it has to stay that way. So we need to keep that governance and ownership for each one of the participants. And I think that's what we share with Junobank. That's a common vision that we have. Generating decentralized data, implementing technology into biobanking, and of course the healthcare system in the future. And I think that's where we connect, and that's why we decided to go with the Junobank technology. I don't know what you think, Daniel, but I think that's quite like the reason why we actually connected.
No, totally. And I am really honored to be part of your team, if I may, like, because we're trying to be like Federico's and everybody else's companies, kind of the best partner to exactly that. I mean, to offer everyone that is interested in exploring the genomic revolution from a certain angle, right? This is a very special and dear of obviously care, because I am Mexican, angle that has Federico, because as he's saying, I mean, we are Latinos only represents a very, I mean, 1 digit in the total amount of data, and that's mainly for 2 reasons. One is obviously economical, and the other one is trust, right? There's not been enough, or there's not a company that offers enough trust to the users in order to handle with respect, with dignity, and obviously, as Federico was saying, with respect to ownership, right? And then this is not ours, right? We are just using the blockchain technology, and we're adapting it. We're engineers, right? we are adapting this technology to offer exactly the capabilities that these communities are used to, which is to distribute the rewards, right? And now we are coming to an era where you can tokenize the shares of a company. I mean, you can literally convert this into tokens that are already authorized by the SEC. We happen to have another partner that is called Securitize. Securitize is really advanced in this area. So we are a partner that can help companies to distribute value if the value distribution is based on their equity. If the value distribution is based on earnings, we can also do that because we provide a wallet, right, for each and every participant of each company, and there's an excellent distribution channel for that as well. So in the future, if you create your own cryptocurrency, your own stable coin, if you want to reward them with even a central bank emitted coins that are coming, right? Stable coins emitted by central banks, that is going to be interesting, whatever. The technology is already in place, and you would be ready to fulfill that promise and say, hey, we are I don't know, maybe dreaming in the next years. Hey, here's the first vaccine made with this information or based in this information, so it's calibrated for a specific population, right? I mean, if I'm saying nonsense, please tell me. But I believe we're heading to the precision medicine era, and precision medicine is going to be regional, right? Because we are clusters of humans in regions, in geographical regions. So this is what we want to cooperate. We want to collaborate, and again, we're super excited, and thank you, Federico and your team, and Christian for having us as your partners.
Yeah. I think this is a good opportunity to, excuse me, move into the panel discussion. I mean, this is a good transition because I think the last thing you said, Federico, was around two things that I think are really awesome what Somos is doing. Number one, it's providing a population that's never had the opportunity before to gather information data. You're providing that, right? Inclusion. And number two, you're actually being cognizant of data security also. And those are two things that are, it's embarrassing to admit, but those are two things that aren't considered by current solutions out there, right? So I think the first question I have for you is, why is it important to be inclusive in healthcare, in genetic research? Why is that something that's important? Can you just elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So we've seen during the last couple of years, after the whole genome project finished in the early 2000s, there was no data from Hispanics and Latinos included in that type of projects. And of course, the reason why is because it was, I mean, the cost to generate or to create that type of project was huge, just to really understand the genome of the human species. And then, as Daniel mentioned, there's a problem in terms of the cost of technology. There's a problem in terms of access to the technology in the Latin American latitudes, which is changing, of course. It's constantly changing. But the reality is that we don't have right now enough data to really fill the gaps in the genome that come from these specific groups. So we have a lot of data from Caucasians. We have a lot of data from Asia. We have a lot of data from admixed groups in North America, but we do not have enough data from the native groups in Latin America. And I think actually this might answer one of the questions that is already there in the panel when it comes to these companies like 23andMe and the type of data that they have. Of course, those big companies like Ancestry or 23andMe, they do have a lot of information from admixed Latinos or Hispanics, but the problem comes when you do not have access to information from the native or the native groups or the indigenous nations in the country or in the continent. I say the country because we specifically have started here in Mexico. And you need that type of data for different genomic analysis, like imputation analysis, and in order to really make more accurate interpretation and predictions of those admixed Latinos, that there's a fraction of their genome that you cannot predict, and you're trying to predict right now with the data from other groups like Caucasians, for example. And there are many publications, actually, some of them from Carlos Bustamante, where you can see that there's a problem of misdiagnosis or misinterpretation of the data, because the predictions in admixed populations like Latinos are being done with data from these groups that I mentioned before, like Caucasians. So it's very important to have these groups represented in scientific databases. And that's where we realized that we could develop something completely different. But as you mentioned before, Suk, we also realized at the same time that we wanted to avoid gatekeeping. We wanted to avoid, what we've called biodigital colonization. So we wanted really people really to feel comfortable with sharing their data, because they allow us to access their data and to generate, if it's a customer, to generate a report so that they can have different insights from their genetic data that they are sharing with us. But from those indigenous nations, if they want to co-participate in research protocols, they also have to give us permission to do it. So even though we are helping them generate the data, and that might sound very risky for a startup, it's like, so you are helping and investing in generated data for them, but some of the participants might opt out or revoke the use of their data. Yes, of course, because we know that if we build an honest and transparent relationship with them, we might have the chance in the future to use that data for further research. But if we are not allowed to use it in the future, well, that's part of the flipping the coin and doing these type of projects that have also social impact, right? So I think that's the importance of including more diverse groups into scientific research. And I think this is going to change. And I also think these type of approaches are going to become the new state of the art on data management. And we invite also other research groups to participate and do it this way, because we know that this is very soon going to change. We've seen these huge companies like 23andMe and Ancestry trying to just stop with the direct-to-consumer services that they are offering, because they have invested a lot of money, and of course they have huge databases, but at the same time, people stopped doing direct-to-consumer genetic testing because they were concerned about data security and privacy. So we know that this is changing very fast, and we know that right now, not only the customer is a lot more interested about the topic, and also let's say that they read more about it, and they participate in different forums and different blogs, and they see it in the media. But I would say that even the indigenous leaders here in Mexico, they understand what we are talking about. We've been with them, and we are actually going to be visiting some of the groups in the next couple of weeks. But the last time that we were with some of the groups in the northern of the country, in Chihuahua, one of the governors or the leaders of the group, she understood perfectly what a database is, who is going to store my data, who is going to be having access to it, who is going to own the data, So even though we think as these groups being vulnerable, that's not the case. They think of themselves very differently, and they are very smart, and they really understand, and they are also technology driven, and they have smartphones, and they have internet. So we need to include them and to make them a part of the project. And if we generate any type of value in the future, even sharing the value and part of the profits with them. So I think that's why inclusion becomes so important. And I would say that inclusion, but doing it the right way, is even more important, because you can start generating a lot of data. And there are some groups in Asia that it's only one group and they own millions and millions of genomes from the people, and people accepted, and they gave their samples and they consented to it, but in the end they don't have control of their own data. And I would say that Daniel already has already thought about that, and I think Junobank will help also to solve these type of issues where people will be able to claim for the ownership of their data if their data has been shared or distributed, because I would say that not only in research, but also in commercial projects, that might become very promiscuous. And so data can go from one point to the other very easily. And we see that with our customers too. So we have to be very careful, and we have to do it the right way. And I think it's the right timing for it.
That's amazing. No, I think it's really great that you're stepping in for a market that has been underserved. And then in addition to that, you're stepping ahead of the curve and saying, hey, beyond this, there's going to be an issue, and you're looking to the future, right? And you're saying there's going to be an issue, and we want to provide ownership of all data. So those are two things that are, I think it's quite rare to see among any genetic testing service company out there. So those are really awesome to see. I think I'm going to make an inference, and then I have a question for you, Daniel. It's kind of very similar to, I just today read that General Motors by 2035 is going to stop creating diesel and unleaded cars, right? That's a big statement. And Tesla said this 20 years ago. And they were the ones that put their feet in the ground and say, you know what, we see a future that's going a direction. And regardless the situation is now, we're gonna invest all of our resources in this idea of the vision of the future. So I really do think that's what you're doing, and I think it's awesome. Daniel, I have a question for you. In terms of data security, what are current existing genetic testing services not doing? What are things that they're avoiding or holding back for the future? And where does Junobank step in that capacity?
That's a very interesting question. It's not as simple as I'm going to put it, but just for the sake of just to be very succinct, the thing that they're not doing is not creating or let me rephrase it. I just recently graduated from London School of Economics of a program that is data laws, right? So as a conclusion, I stated like companies are failing to their users not to create bad surprises, right? Or I don't know if displeasant surprises when they announce something. Like for instance, Ancestry DNA last year announcing that 75% of their equity was going to be bought, and actually that was done by a private equity company, right? That happens to have a lot of Chinese money. I am not against Chinese money. I am against that. The question is, they didn't took all of their users in consideration to this. Now the data is going to that hands. I don't know if those hands are ethically good or bad. That's not me to decide that. But that was an ugly surprise for many of the users of Ancestry DNA. They don't want to be a merchandise, right? They don't want their data to be merchandise, exchanging from hand to hand. And even if that would be the case, well, just ask them before. We're planning to merge, or we're planning to be acquired, or whatever. But companies are just, we're living in the corporate internet era. I mean, they are the titans right now. They feel they can do everything they want. They can now even presidents have to abide to their policies, right? And they can be banned. We are seeing now even Wall Street people being banned from social media channels. I mean, it's an interesting thing. So again, blockchain is about giving power to the user, regardless of who is using that. That's another interesting question. Like for instance, in the panel from Martin Davila, thank you for the question. Martin says, hey, is there going to be an API so I can connect to that? Yeah, the API is user per user. You will have to ask permission from each and every one of those, because now there's no central database. It's we have to think about that. Some people will say, so wow, I mean, I'll have to request like 10,000 clicks or 1,000,000 clicks, right? No, that's not going to happen. That's not how things happen. We think in terms of addresses, right? If you want to send something to email and broadcast a message, well, you use the mailing, the postage service, and you do it that way, right? The same happens with the blockchain. You have a bunch of addresses that you already know that they have their information, let's say in the biobank of Somos, and then you can broadcast a message inviting to your research, Martin. Hopefully in the near future is going to be one of the most interesting researchers for Latinos. And then you can partner with Somos, and then you can be transparent about who is sharing your information with you, and then you have to sign using a cryptographic signature to be a good custodian and a good guest, right, inside those data rooms, as we call them, the secure data rooms. And yeah, if you don't do anything wrong with the data, you'll be always welcome and invited to each and every one of those wallets. And then, so you mentioned something really important. I mean, when Tesla started the journey of this changing, right? He expected, I remember, to shift the mindset of people in 2040, 2050, right? And the difference or the gap that this is super, I mean, light speed changing, was done by the users, right? The backers of this idea, saying, hey, climate change is real, we need to do something. And then the user started buying Teslas, and obviously is the best way you can endorse a company, right? Like investing on the company or buying their products. So again, I believe privacy is going to be the same thing. Many of our investors that are really smart people would say, hey, privacy is a must. I mean, 23andMe should have their wallet. Ancestry DNA should have their wallet. Offer control. And the thing is that, I don't know if you have read the news, but Apple just announced that in his new version of iOS is making a radical change in terms of privacy. Apple is changing from an opt-in by default to an opt-out by default in terms of the switch to share your data with the rest of the apps. This is exactly what we were started talking 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
And now it's happening because, again, people understands privacy as control more than the aspect of economic rewards, because people is approaching to Junobank, say, hey, but you're not going to be selling the data whatsoever. No, this is about dignity. Privacy is about dignity. It's about the user choosing whether, if I want to share my data with A, with B, with everyone. That's a very personal decision, and this is and privacy, I believe, this is what is about.
Absolutely. And I have one question. I'd like to, either of you can take this question up, to give all our attendees a picture of what this relationship looks like. What's that partnership between Somos and Junobank look like? Can either of you just talk about what that connection is, how we are helping and how we are working together?
It's okay if I step in. I mean,
Please.
I would love to say it from the concept, and then I would like Daniel to go a little bit deeper in more like the technical side on how to implement it, which I think it's the perfect balance. So, well, we've been talking about data decentralization, ownership, governance, and when we realized that we needed to generate this type of information from some of the groups that have been more abused, I wouldn't say, as I mentioned before, that they are vulnerable groups, but yes, some of the groups that have been more abused historically, from governments, from private institutions, and we've seen those type of things also with some native groups, Native American groups in the US as well, like the Navajos, that they participated in some research projects. Some of the universities that were doing the research project with them, they were allowed to use the information for X and Y. And then I think it was only focused on diabetes. And then they misused the information. And of course, that was a big problem. So Navajo said, we are not going to participate in any type of research. And we are really keeping our genetic data for ourselves. And we are preserving our culture within the group, right? So when we realized that this is something very similar with other indigenous nations in Mexico and in Central and South America, but we also realized that some of the groups, they haven't faced these issues yet, but it will happen at some point. So they are a lot more naive in terms of how to co-participate in these type of projects. And they are very, yeah, I think naive would be the answer. And so we want to just like go a couple of years into the future and say, this is going to happen. This is going to happen also from those big corporates that will want your information to do different type of research. And we want to help right now to generate the information and protect you from this situation. So I think that's where we understood that we needed to implement technology in order to achieve that, because as a concept, it might sound really nice and it might sound like something very philanthropic and something that needs to be done, but to put it into practice and actually doing it and developing it, that's a huge task. And I would say that's where Junobank comes into play. And I would like Daniel to just like talk a little bit more on the technical side of how you actually do it. So we go and we talk with the indigenous communities and with the leaders of the communities. Then we try to spread a little bit more and go and talk and have other people, not only the leaders, to join and participate in the project. And that, of course, becomes into a project that will collect DNA samples or blood samples or saliva samples or any type of testing that we would like to do or we will need to do in the future. So at that point, it's still very fragile and it's still very insecure, right? So that's where when we realized that we needed to digitalize the value of those biological assets and make them or find a way to make people own it. And that's when Junobank came into play. So I would like you, Daniel, to just like put with this example on how we actually go to the communities. We invite the community to participate, and then they provide their samples. And what happens after that, once you provide a sample, I think that's more a technical description that Daniel can help us with it.
No, thank you very much. Very excited to talk a little bit. I mean, I don't want to give you know, like so expert, but everything, of course, starts here, right, with the biosample tube. So this is where our technology comes in. Of course, we are connecting the analog world or the physical world with the blockchain. So it's challenging. Of course, there are many even people that saying that this is a very, you know, like yeah, it's a challenging thing. So maybe you're not be able to see it, but of course this is a barcode. Well, it's a barcoded tube, and it has a small number. This small number comes from the manufacturer, and what we produce. So this is the Samos ID card that comes with every single kit that we have partnered to produce and distribute with the permission of Samos, right? And this is, I believe, the main differentiator here is let me to that this QR code this QR code is unique to this saliva tube. So it corresponds to the serial number of the manufacturer. And for each of the saliva tubes, we create a non-fungible token. It's a unique token that people using a wallet. So this is obviously a card that also allows you to create, let me just put it here. Okay, like this, to create 12 unique words, right? That comes from a wallet. This is a typical 12 words mnemonic combination to generate a wallet. So it's literally everything, the magic happens in this card. So as we say here, we respect your privacy and we don't know who you are because you only need your 12 words and your sample in order to control the whole experience. And I believe this is this will have to set an example at least to say, hey, you don't need to disclose your name. You don't need to disclose where do you live. You don't need to disclose your not even your email sometimes to get your samples processed by a laboratory. You just need a wallet, a public address that represents your sample, a token that represents your permission. So this token is revocable. So this permission is granted by the donor to the permittee. In this case, the permittee is Somos, and this is done by a public blockchain. So the good thing is that even if, knock on wood, Junobank disappears, these contracts are still valid and still traceable because we are using Ethereum technology, and Ethereum technology is not going to go away in a while, hopefully maybe in 50, 100 years. But what we're trying to do is to use the blockchain as a notary service, an international digital public service to establish relationship between a donor and a biobank, right? In this case, Somos is for us is a biobank, and people is able to write in the blockchain their will about what they can do or what they cannot do with their data, and we revise those tokens. So Genobank is like a provider of these connections. So as Federico was saying, this is a very nice mechanism, we think, to establish the governance of genomic data. Adding to that, of course, we tokenize the data, the residual data from the biosamples, and of course, those are very special. They have a biological signature. We use 96 SNPs, 96 exclusive SNPs from each participant to create an identifier, and that identifier is how they can own their SNPs. Hopefully later we will go deeper into these variant calling files and all these variants that people have, but that's the state of the technology right now, and we are super excited. I don't know if that was a little bit extended, but
no, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, it's perfect. I think we might be doing a follow-up webinar where we get into the actual picture model of what we do, but I think in a sentence or less, two things: we're providing, licensing of our technology, where we provide tokenization, wallet creation, all that kind of good stuff. And the second thing is the kind of white labeling the kits, right? It's powered by Junobank. So that's an awesome description for sure. So we have 5 more minutes. I want to just leave some time for some Q&A. I know we got some questions in. Let me just pull a few of them up here. I think we talked about the API question. I think Federico, you mentioned a bit about 23andMe and their access to large amounts of Latino Hispanic data. Could you just really briefly just touch on it? Because I know you touched on it a second ago, but considering that 23andMe does have access to it, what's that mean? What's missing still on that side?
And yeah, I can go deeper into that. As I mentioned before, the problem of not having actual data from indigenous nations right now in Mexico, because that's our core right now. Of course, looking to expand. Since those big companies don't have access to this type of data because there's no public data. There hasn't been published, not for commercial purposes, and just a bit of data for research purposes. So these companies don't have a good resolution for the Latin American ancestry reports that they offer. And actually, we can see that because we get a lot of users. I would say that 40 to 45% of our users in our database come from 23andMe. So those are Latinos that want to have a better resolution on their reports. And that's why they come to us, right? So instead of just having this report that says your X percentage of Native American, which is a very wide term saying Native American, you have, with Somos, you can go deeper and say, okay, you have X percentage that actually resembles to these specific groups that we've created reference panels from. So I would say that that's like the biggest difference. And that's why Somos is growing fast, and Somos is also becoming an added value to the customers out there that have been using those other companies' genetic testing.
1,000 users, Federico,
Yeah,
and growing in just a couple of months.
300.
Congratulations.
That's amazing. Yeah. We have one question coming in. I think this is for you, Daniel. I'm not sure if you're aware of this player, but we're being asked similarities or differences between genomes.io from the UK. Are you familiar with the company?
Yes, Aldo Di Pape. He's the CEO. We've been in conversations. They are we share the Ethereum space. Yeah, very similar in terms of the approach. They don't use NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which I believe it's a technical differentiator and very important, because we believe that each genome is unique. I mean, we don't think that. I mean, the biology states that. I mean, we are unique biological art pieces, if I may. So we use very specific technology to differentiate everyone's data. So I believe they are not using that. And if they are using that, please let us know, because that's where our patent can kick in, and we can ask for a license fee or something like that. Just kidding. Now, it's blockchain is about collaboration, right? It's about collaboration, but it's about collaboration that is allowed by the user, right? We could be connected. We can connect to all the world all day long, but in order for the data to flow in our highway, permission must be granted from the user, and that's the main important thing. So Genomes.io is based on UK. Again, I invited Aldo to participate. They are just doing their thing. I respect them a lot. I believe that's a good team, good team with people, and hopefully we can do something together.
Great, awesome. I think we have one more Q&A. For some reason, I have to exit my screen to. Cal Kaplan comes in with, where can I see Junobank's financial information? I believe we can refer you to our WeFunder page, where we have our Form C. It's public. You'll be able to do a deep dive into our financials for the past few years. So in our email, we'll be forwarding a link to our WeFunder, and then from there you can find all the information that's necessary for our background. It looks like that's all the questions that we have here. What we will be doing is, this is being recorded, so we'll share this with everyone. We'll share all the resources. And we also had someone reach out, Federico, who's interested in testing Somos. So I'll definitely link you two together as well and continue that conversation. Before we do go, I'd like to give everyone just a brief notice. Junobank just recently launched their extension of their Reg CF that they launched last year on Republic. Right now, we're just above 50% of our minimum goal. And this is a really amazing opportunity, right? Since last year, for those who are here from Republic, you might have understood, what our position was in the market, how we were looking at, our adoption and where we want to go. A lot has changed since then, and we really, really do encourage all of you to read through our story and our direction that we're going. In addition to Somos, there's a lot of activity happening with us, arranging partnerships with others in the space. So we really do look forward to having you, look through our page and ask any questions. And we will be running a few other webinars in the next coming weeks, talking about not only partnerships, but developments in terms of technical developments, other directions that we're going with the new world that we live in COVID-19, and many more as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And Federico and Daniel, thank you for having panels today.
Thank you very much, guys, and just keep it up with the work. It's a great company, great concept, and happy to be partners and being able to work together. Thank you guys for inviting me, and I will also like to invite people to go into the Samos webpage.
SamosAncestria.com. Yes.
And also, if they have questions, as you mentioned before, just go ahead and you can continue asking, and we will be very happy answering those questions. Also for you, Martin, that we saw you have some specific questions, I will contact back to you.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Federico, for accepting the invitation. You as a CEO and Christian and Samos are very dear to Junobank and our team. You are our first real customer. We appreciate the confidence in that. It's not easy to jump into this new world of decentralization. It's new concept. We've been through a lot of challenges together. I really appreciate your patience, your willingness to experience this new way of connecting data, and hopefully we can help your company to get to 1 million users in the next coming years. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate Suk. Thank you for the opportunity, and each and every one of you guys that connected today. Thank you very much for being here, for asking questions, and your presence is really valuable for us. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.